Right, good morning everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the ESPO Finance and Audit Subcommittee. The meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and it will also be available for viewing after the meeting. I remind members and officers to have their microphones on mute until they wish to speak. And first of all, we've received apologies from Councillor Jamieson from Norfolk and Councillor Shayla from Cambridgeshire. I've also received apologies from Lauren Haslam, the Consortium Secretary. Okay, so the minutes of, without further ado, propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of October 2023 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rawlings, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest that they wish to declare? Okay, thank you. Item 3, to advise of other items. There are no urgent items, which moves us on to our first item on the agenda, and may invite Matt Davis, the Audit Manager at Leicestershire County Council, to present his progress update. This is covered on pages 9 to 18 of your agenda packs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's quite a routine progress against plan report for ourselves, but as a reminder to this committee, it was the plan that was discussed last year at 15th of March committee and then approved at management committee on the 22nd of March. How we formulate the plan will be in the next chapter, so the next paper, sorry. So I don't intend to dwell on that, but moving straight on to Appendix 5, that talks about our assurance levels, which are full, substantial, partial or little assurance. Partial little assurance will typically contain what we call a high importance recommendation, or one or more, that we'd follow up and retest and keep this committee updated about the whether the risks have actually been addressed. The significance of that, it brings me nicely onto straight onto paragraph 9 of this report that makes it quite clear that there are no high importance recommendations at the minute, either legacy high importance recommendations or any in our current year coverage. So that is really healthy news in itself, to be honest. Moving straight on to paragraph 10, this talks on page 11. This talks about our current progress with the 23-24 plan. And it explains that we had a total of 18 pieces of work to cover off, 10 of which at the date of publicising this were complete and 8 that were in various stages of work in progress. On face value, if I was looking at that in face value, to be honest, I'd think it was a little bit concerning because you've got 2 months left with about, on paper, 45% of the plan left to complete. So that is why paragraph 11 goes into far more detail as to the current status of those work in progress. So without wishing to dwell on them, because they are in the back as well in the appendices, I just wanted to update this committee on the progress with the areas that are work in progress. So the 2 that were stated in that paragraph as being required to be undertaken in the final quarter due to sample size requirements, they are approximately 90% complete now. So we're well on track with both of those, that's fine. Similarly with the one audit that we wanted to do at the same time, just as an explanation, if we're looking at IT general controls, it makes common sense to look at the IT developments work at the same time. So that's why we pulled those together. So again, that's about 90% testing completed. So we're just about to put pen to paper on the actual report itself, draft report. The 2 that it talks about have progressed as far as they could do at this stage. One is the rebates work, and at the minute evidence is being collected from ESPO officers for us to carry out our testing on that. And the other one relates to public procurement programme. As we all know, that doesn't go live until October 24, so that will straddle 2 financial years, and the work we're doing at the minute is governance work. So, and then we just talk about 3 that are ongoing work, one of which is the warehouse, of course, because the warehouse very much ongoing work. So really, as I said, it's quite a whistle-stop tour because it's quite a good news position. Recapping the headlines as I see them for this committee is, first of all, it's inevitable that some work will straddle more than one financial year. I always say this because it doesn't end on the 31st of March. So that will be reflected in the next paper with some of the areas that we do that straddles more than one financial year. Importantly for this committee, we're on track to deliver the 23-24 plan, as I've explained, with those areas of work in progress. And I guess the most important thing is that, as I've stressed before, there are no high importance recommendations. And for anyone new to this committee, know that there have been previously. It's not unusual to have high importance recommendations going through and being discussed and debated here. So that is a good news story. So I'm more than happy to take any questions on that, but we're in a good position.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, just out of pure curiosity, I think. When we mention about on, I think it was the counter fraud one, there was duplication of payments totaling 2.3k. Yeah. And I just wondered how we got to a situation of duplication. So that was one, and I think you've put mitigation in there. Yeah. And the other one was just asking how the Critical Friend Project Board is working regarding the warehouse.
Personally, I think it's, let me take the second question first. I think it's working very well, to be honest, the Critical Friend. We've got two aspects to it. We've got myself that sits on the actual project board at high level, governance level, so looking at the risks and issues in that way. And then we've got an operational auditor that's looking at the detailed side. And that's continuing into the next financial year as well. So I think it's healthy that we've got it at the two levels. We've got someone involved in the detail side, but we've also got it at sort of a high level. I don't know whether Christian wants to come in at all on that, because obviously Christian's on the same board.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm really grateful to Matt. He's also sat on the project board when we implemented the website, and that went very well as a project. So we tried to mimic that approach. For me, I really enjoy having that kind of challenge from outside the organisation, because there's always a risk if everything's internal. So, the Critical Friend is about right, and Matt's, particularly strong with things like, challenge us a little bit on the risk register, and so just bring something different. And the goal we have is to have a good project and to get it on time in full. And so we certainly welcome and actively invite people to join the boards.
And perhaps if I just come in on the first point about the sort of counter fraud. So I think perhaps a bit of context is quite helpful. So the sort of error rate that's been picked up is less than 0.002% kind of error rate. So hopefully that gives the committee some sort of confidence. It's not prevalent. What we'd seen with this particular one was actually it was a refund to some schools, and it was an issue between actually the structure of the school as to whether it went to the individual school or the MAT head office. So that was one of the things that we identified. And off the back of that, we have sort of reviewed and tried to tighten up the processes, but hopefully the sort of scale gives you some comfort that it's not a wide scale problem.
The scale is great. That's what I needed. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Rawlins.
Just as a general point, I don't expect any detailed answers in view of the sensitivity of the subject of cybersecurity. But are we confident about the cover we've got for sort of the renewed threats with cybersecurity in terms of attacks that are out there in the public sector at the moment, and also the relentless effort that the criminal fraternity put into developing ever more complicated traps to make people click on links and those sort of things?
So perhaps if I start off with that. Yeah, I think I'd recognise the problem. So if we start there, we absolutely recognise the problem. I think we're as confident as anyone can be. We obviously do an annual penetration test. We've developed some specific staff training for everybody to do, because a lot of these things are just about individuals clicking on things they shouldn't click on. So we've kind of done that. We obviously audited a lot on that. We had a high risk recommendation, which has been closed about 6 to 12 months ago, I think. We had a legacy system. But yeah, it's obviously a major risk on our risk record and will remain to be so. And we're constantly having to adapt as the threat changes.
You talk about sort of legacy systems. I mean, obviously, for local authorities across the country, legacy systems can be quite an issue because of the complexity of the services and everything that they offer. With ESPO, because you're more in the commercial sector and you have to keep these things commercially very up to date, one supposes that we have limited reliance on legacy systems, or there's a plan to phase them out. Thank you.
Yeah, just to answer that, you're absolutely spot on. The legacy system, ironically, that you've just was one that was more from a HR system from local authority as opposed to a kind of commercial system. So I recognise what you said.
Thank you. Any further questions? In which case, as there are no more questions, may I move we approve the progress update received from the 2023-24, noting there are no high importance recommendations with the committee's domain. May I have somebody to second that, please? Councillor Butlin, thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 5, the internal audit plan 24-25. May I now call upon Neil Jones, Head of Internal Audit and Assurance at Leicestershire County Council, to introduce this report along with Matt, which is covered on pages 19 to 36 in your packs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a bit of a double header first, so I'll just introduce the requirements for our annual audit plan. Matt will then give some detail on how it's been composed, and then I'll pick up at the back end just on the work we're having done on external quality assessment, excuse me, and also a revision to the internal audit charter. So in the background to the report, it explains that we, Internal Audit Service at Leicestershire, as do your internal audit services in your host authorities, we all work to the public sector internal audit standards, and they set expectations on how we go about our work. So this annual plan is the start of a new cycle, and we have to present a wide scope of audits, because then at the back end of the year, around about October, I'll be providing the subcommittee with an annual report, and that contains an overall opinion on the adequacy of ESPO's control environment. So that's its systems of governance, risk management and internal control. So that's why we do it. Matt's now going to give you a little bit of on how the methodology followed.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, Neil touched on there the external quality assessment that he's going to be talking to you about later. But if I tell you that the plan methodology for ESPO and other clients of ours, but particularly ESPO, is being submitted as part of evidence to that quality assessment. So we will get feedback on the plan. But just to give you some assurance as to the work involved, paragraphs 8 to 11 really of the report can be boiled down into, first of all, the consultation that took place. There was consultation with ESPO director and his leadership team, with the consortia treasurer and secretary, obviously with the head of internal audit, and with people within the team as well, the team of auditors. These conversations predominantly focused around emerging risks, plan changes within the organisations and and potential issues. But then also we looked at sort of the cyclical audits and the audits that will straddle financial years, and the audits that would be required for the future, probably not next year, but the year after. Other parts of the methodology include, we'll look at the external audit coverage and look at any material control weaknesses they might come out with or improvements that they suggest. We heavily review ESPO's risk management process and risk register, a paper for which was submitted to this committee at the previous meeting. Part of the work involves a 5-year cross-referencing of ESPO's risk registers to our plan to make sure we're addressing all the key risks over a cyclical period rather than a rolling plan. As I've said, we also identify areas for future years, so the strategic universe for ESPO, if you like, audit universe, auditable areas for us to look at. I then also looked at the risks and issues on both a local and a national level, particularly the Institute of Internal Auditors Risk in Focus publication that gave key risks, one of which we've already mentioned. Cyber, as you'd expect, was one of the key risk areas, as well as the National Risk Register. I reviewed governance arrangements, including the role of this committee, management committee, the chief officers group and associated papers, also the annual governance statements and the financial accounts, and also comparison against similar purchasing organisation, their audit plans. So that was addressed as well. Having explained the methodology, paragraphs 12 to 15 of the plan itself form Appendix 1 to this pack on page 25. So I'm confident that the plan, if people want to look at Appendix 1 on page 25, I'm confident that it covers, in addition to how it's actually been formulated, a wide scope of audits, a wide range of audits. Importantly, it addresses the three key main areas of the head of audit opinion in relation to governance, risk management and internal controls. We've got in there hot topics such as cyber, as I've already mentioned. We've got in there current events, for example, the warehouse build and the new procurement regs. We have also got areas that are specific to the organisation, so things like rebates and benchmarking. With the National Fraud Initiative and the two areas we've put in there, it gives a good area coverage of counter-fraud areas as well. And it does a robust coverage of financial and IT risks as well. I think the most important thing to say, though, also is that I've kept back an element for both contingency and emerging issues. So we do have a degree of flexibility, in-year flexibility, even before we think about the need for any substitute jobs. So that's the plan itself. Finally, paragraphs 16 to 18 talk about how we progress the plan. And again, this can be summarised as we agree a terms of reference. We then conduct the work, obviously. Importantly, we talk through interim findings, risks and recommendations so that there are no surprises and we know if there's any compensating controls that we may have missed. We produce a draft audit for audit report for conversation, for discussion, and then the final report. We update stakeholders throughout the year on a quarterly basis, but then obviously we update this committee regarding any high importance recommendations. And because this committee meets twice yearly, if there are any more urgent high importance recommendations, we'd address those through management committee. So that's the plan. I'll now hand back over to Neil to cover off the rest of the report before we'll gladly take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So just explaining now about it's a requirement for us every 5 years to have an independent assessment of conformance to those standards I mentioned earlier on. So the previous assessment 5 years ago, or just over 5 years ago, we did attain a top rating. So hopefully we can maintain that. So paragraph 20 explains the approach that we chose and it was formally approved by the members of the Council's Corporate Governance Committee. And the independent assessment is going to be undertaken by a very experienced internal audit and risk professional. And the cost represents very good value for money. So whilst ESPO won't incur any direct cost of this external quality assessment, the assessor is at liberty to perhaps either contact the chair or contact the director, either to conduct an interview or issue any digital questionnaires they may do. So obviously we'd be grateful if they do that you can complete them if you're chosen. So Matt mentioned we've already sent information off to the assessor for the first stage, and that's which is a readiness check, and then we're expecting a report back in March, April, but obviously the committee now doesn't meet again till October, so we won't be able to report that back until October. And then the final part of this report really just explains that because of the timing of that quality assessment, just thought it was prudent to review and revise the internal audit charter for ESPO. So this is a key governance document, so it takes account now of the increased responsibilities of this subcommittee. So that's been revised in that sense. Paragraphs 22 and 23 explain the purpose of it. It's a document that helps support our work in terms of giving us powers and responsibilities, and it's a document that also enables us to engage with management, so it is very important. So it's been reviewed. There's only minor changes, and they are highlighted in yellow in Appendix 2, and that's on page 27. So I think that concludes the whole of the report. So if anybody's got any questions about any of those 3 sections, please take them.
Thank you, Neil and Matt. Does anyone have any comments or questions, please? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. It's just a question that with the external quality assessment, you're using the same methodology, and it was 5 years ago. I'm just wondering why you're using the same methodology. Has it changed or not changed? Or, 5 years to me is quite a long time.
If I'm honest, it's substantially cheaper than going down a full assessment route by one of the accounting organisations like the IIA or SIPFA. It worked well the previous time. It's a different assessor, completely different assessor, but it is in vogue that people, are you doing it that way, sort of thing. So we're expecting a lot more sort of focus, I think, on some of our areas of work than the previous one 5 years ago. So I think even though it's the same methodology, it's not stuck in time.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other questions? What I'd like to do is welcome Councillor Neil Shaler, who's joined us online. Welcome, Neil. If you're there, we can't see your happy smiling face, but I'm sure you're with us in spirit. And he's there. He's there. Hello, Neil. You all right? Nice to see you.
Good.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Any further questions for either Neil or Matt, please? Okay. Oh, excuse me. In which case, there's no more questions. I move that we approve the ESPO internal audit plan for 24-25. Note the requirements for LCC IAS to have an independent external quality assessment, and approve the revised ESPO internal audit charter. May I have a second, please? Councillor Rawlings, you had your hand up first. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to leave the meeting now. Is that okay?
It's very good. Yeah, by all means. Thank you, gentlemen, if you're leaving. Okay, it says here the date of the next meeting. The next meeting of the subcommittee is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 9th of October 2024 at 10:30 a.m, presumably here in the Sparkenhole room in County Hall. And there are no other urgent items as previously stated. Okay, moving on, in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972, I move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business on the grounds they involve the disclosure of exempt information. May I have somebody to second that, please? Councillor Rawlings, thank you very much indeed. And we'll confirm when everybody has left the meeting.